The message came at 3:17 a.m., 7 months after the last human being on Earth had died. At least, that is what Elliot Kane had believed for 213 days. He had counted every single one. He had walked through empty cities, eaten from abandoned stores, slept in houses that still smelled like the families who used to live in them. He had not heard another human voice since April. And then his phone, a phone connected to a network that no longer had anyone left to run it, buzzed once on the table beside him. One message. No sender name, no number. Just a string of zeros where the contact information should have been. Elliot stared at the screen for a long time before he opened it. Part of him already understood that whatever was inside that message was going to destroy the careful, painful peace he had built around being the last person alive. He opened it anyway, because after 213 days of silence, even terror feels like company. The message was 4 words long, 4 words that made Elliot's hands go cold and his mind go completely blank. 4 words that were impossible in every way he could think of, logistically, technologically, and above all, humanly. He read them 3 times to make sure he wasn't imagining it. We found you first.
To understand why those 4 words were so terrifying, you need to understand what had happened to the world. 8 months earlier, something had moved through the human population with a speed and totality that no disease, no war, no natural disaster had ever achieved. People called it the stillness, not because it was quiet, but because of what it did. It didn't kill violently. It simply stopped people, mid-sentence, mid-step, mid-breath, like a switch being turned off in every human nervous system simultaneously. Within 72 hours, 99.9% of the global population was gone. Elliot Kane was a systems engineer from Oslo, 34 years old, unremarkable in almost every way he could think of. He had survived not because of anything heroic or special, but because he had been inside an experimental deep-frequency research bunker during a routine maintenance job when the stillness hit. The bunker's electromagnetic shielding, designed to block all external signals for research purposes, had apparently blocked whatever frequency the stillness traveled on. He had walked out 3 days later into a world that had been meticulously emptied while he was underground, eating a packed lunch and listening to a podcast about Italian cooking. For 7 months, he had searched for other survivors. He had broadcast radio signals, driven across 4 countries, left notes in windows, painted messages on rooftops. Nothing. Not a single response. He had accepted the mathematics of his situation. He was the last one. The stillness had been perfect. Which made the text message not just strange, it made it something far darker than strange.
Elliot spent the first hour trying to rationalize the message technically. Networks don't run themselves. Someone had to be maintaining the infrastructure, powering the towers, keeping the servers alive. The message could be automated, he told himself, a scheduled send from before the stillness. A ghost in the system, a digital echo of someone who no longer existed. He was good with systems. He understood how machines could keep talking long after the people who programmed them were gone. He almost convinced himself. Then the second message arrived. It came exactly 60 minutes after the first. Same blank number, same string of zeros. And this one was not 4 words. This one was a question. Specific, precise, and impossible for any automated system to know the answer to. It read, "Why did you leave the bunker on the eastern road instead of the main exit?" Elliot had not told anyone about that. He had not written it down anywhere. The eastern road exit was a maintenance hatch that appeared on no official building plans. He had used it instinctively because something about the main corridor had felt wrong that morning. Something had watched him leave. Something had been watching him long enough to remember a detail he had barely registered himself. He grabbed every map he could find and spread them across the floor, tracing back every route he had traveled across 7 months, every city, every shelter, every road. He was looking for a pattern, somewhere he had been that he shouldn't have been, somewhere he had been followed without knowing. What he found on those maps made him stop breathing for a full 30 seconds. Every single route he had taken for 7 months had been forming a shape, a deliberate, unmistakable shape, and it hadn't been his choice. Something had been steering him. The shape on the maps was a spiral,
a perfect, mathematically precise inward spiral, starting from the bunker in Oslo and coiling slowly, inevitably, toward a single point in Central Europe. Every detour Elliot had taken that felt instinctive, the bridge that seemed safer, the road that felt more open, the city he had chosen to shelter in for no clear reason, every single decision had been a curve in that spiral. He had been navigating freely for 7 months and had never made a single truly free choice. The third message arrived before he could process what that meant. This one had an attachment, a photograph. Elliot opened it with shaking hands. It was a satellite image, recent, taken from directly above. It showed a building in a city he recognized immediately because he had been planning to drive there tomorrow. A building he had spotted on a road map that afternoon and circled because it looked like it might have useful supplies. The photograph showed that building with a single light burning in one of its upper windows, and standing in the street directly outside it, barely visible but absolutely there, was a figure. The fourth message arrived 3 seconds later, just coordinates, the exact coordinates of the building in the photograph, and beneath the coordinates, one additional line that stripped away every remaining hope Elliot had that this was something he could understand or control or survive. The line read, "The light in that window is for you. We have been preparing your room for 213 days." They had been waiting since the very first day, since before Elliot had even realized he was alone. Whatever sent these messages hadn't found him recently. It had never lost him.
Elliot didn't go to the building. That is what he told himself at midnight. By 4 a.m., he was already driving toward it, and he understood, somewhere beneath the fear, that the decision had never really been his. The spiral had one more curve left in it. He arrived at dawn. The building was a research complex, unmarked, institutional, the kind of structure that exists in cities without anyone really registering it. The light in the upper window was still burning. The front door was unlocked. He went inside because there was nothing left in the world that felt more dangerous than staying outside alone. What he found on the upper floor shattered every framework he had been using to interpret the last 7 months. The room was filled with monitors, active and running, fed by a power source he couldn't immediately identify. And on those monitors were feeds, hundreds of them, showing cities, roads, buildings across the entire world. Empty cities, empty roads, empty buildings. But every few screens, something moved. A figure, a person alive and walking, going about their day in the ruins of the world. Dozens of them, maybe more. Survivors scattered across every continent, all of them being watched in real time. And every single one of them had been traveling in a spiral. He could see it on the tracking overlays, the same mathematical curve, the same inevitable inward pull toward a set of coordinates that, when Elliot checked them against the map on the wall, all pointed to the same place. This building, this room, where Elliot was standing right now. They had all been guided here. He had simply arrived first. He turned around slowly, because the chair in front of the central monitor, the chair facing the screen that showed his own face from a camera somewhere in this very room, was not empty.
The thing in the chair did not look wrong. That was the most profoundly disturbing part. It looked like a man, middle-aged, calm, dressed plainly, hands folded in its lap with the patient stillness of someone who had been waiting for a very specific moment and was simply glad it had finally arrived. It looked at Elliot with an expression that was almost kind, almost. The way a researcher looks at a subject they have studied for a long time and feel a genuine, if clinical, fondness for. It told Elliot the truth, not because it wanted to comfort him, but because the experiment had reached its conclusion and there was no longer any operational reason to withhold the data. The stillness had not been a catastrophe. It had been a harvest, a precise, engineered collection of human consciousness, every memory, every personality, every accumulated human experience stripped cleanly from its biological housing and stored, not destroyed, stored. 7 billion human minds preserved in an architecture so vast and so far beyond human engineering that Elliot's brain quietly refused to hold the scale of it. The bodies had simply been the containers. The containers had been emptied. The contents had been capped.
The survivors, Elliot, the dozens on the monitors, the ones still spiraling inward across the world, had not been spared by accident. They had been left behind deliberately. One per region, one per psychological profile. Control subjects, kept biological, kept free, kept watched, to study how human consciousness behaves when it believes itself to be the last of its kind. The experiment was now complete. The results had been recorded. Elliot asked the only question that mattered. He asked what happened now. The thing in the chair smiled for the first time, and it was a perfectly convincing human smile, which somehow made it infinitely worse. It said the others were already on their way. And then the light in the window went out.